Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. Hope you're all doing well. I'm Andrew Musgrove, and ladies and gentlemen, pop that cork, pour that champagne, because Aaron Stokes is back in the studio. Having taken a holiday in the week that there was mega change at Newcastle United, he's sulked back into the office and brought a no news week with him. But he did manage to bring the sunshine home, even if it was just for a day or so. In this episode, we're going to be answering your questions in a special transfer Q&A. We've had several emailed in, and we want to hear more from you over the next weeks and months. So please do take down this email address, the EIBW podcast at reachplc.com, and get in touch when you feel like it. Please give the video a thumbs up on YouTube, and really do spare a moment to hit subscribe, because it's free to do so. And a massive 68% of you guys who watch our videos aren't subscribers, but being so means that we can grow the show at a much bigger and better pace. So please do hit subscribe. For those on the audio channel, leave us a rating and review if you get the chance. We really do appreciate your continued support. Let's get on with the show. Aaron, welcome back. How was the holiday?
It was great, but it's good to be back. And I was just about to say, you can call off the search party. People can stop sending the emails and the fan mail, and I'm back. I'm feeling replenished and refreshed and raring to go. And as you say, I missed quite a lot during my week off. Amanda Staveley leaves, Paul Mitchell comes in, Darren Eales speaks to the press, and then I've came back in the last couple of days. There's been absolutely nothing to talk about. So
I'll get your view on those big news items of the week when you were sunning yourself on a beach. But on that, you don't look very tan.
Well, you're the only person that said that to me, actually, because I got a lot of compliments on it yesterday. I think I'm quite tanned.
Not burnt. It's better
not burnt, exactly. I think a couple of days when I was there, I'd maybe spent a little bit too long in the sun, but better after sun.
I mean, we literally did not see the sunshine for 7 days straight.
It's funny because I didn't see a single cloud when I was over there, and I came back and stepped off the plane at Newcastle Airport, and all I could see was clouds. So, but nevertheless, it's good to be back.
It is. It's good to have you back. And like you say, you did miss a very busy week. What has been your view on the appointment of firstly James Bunce, and then the exits of Amanda Staveley and Mirdad Gadusi from Newcastle United?
Look, I think starting with Amanda Staveley, I think on the face of it, very surprising. But I think maybe if you take a step back and zoom out, maybe not so surprising. We obviously know that her stake has decreased in recent months, and we've seen a lot less of her in those sort of public-facing roles. Darren Eales obviously spoke to the North East Press Pack this week and said that the decision was mutual, and it does sort of feel like that was the case. It doesn't feel like it was maybe one side or the other leaning towards it, and you know, maybe this was always the case. They had the 10% for getting the deal over the line, for brokering it, but you know, were they ever going to be the ones to lead the club forward along it in the future? Maybe not. On Paul Mitchell, great appointment, really good appointment. I think whatever you think about Dan Ashworth, I personally think he was a very good appointment, and he did a lot of good things at Newcastle United, but I think Paul Mitchell's track record speaks for itself. And I think in terms of what everybody wants from a sporting director, and that is good, solid recruitment, that is the one thing you are definitely going to get with Paul Mitchell. Very good to see that he's already out with Germany working with Eddie Howe. They had a long chat last week where I'm sure they were setting the world to rights and talking about what they wanted to do. I think he will prove to be a fantastic addition to this club.
James Bunce?
Yeah, very good that they've moved very quickly to get him in as well, just a couple of days after Mitchell came in. Everybody you speak to about Bunce speaks very highly of him, and I think I go back to something I think you said a couple of weeks ago, and that was a lot of, maybe not upheaval, but a lot of uncertainty about what was happening behind the scenes. Ashworth was obviously leading into that. Staveley obviously adds to that. It's good to see that, you know, behind the scenes, there's still Darren Eales, there's still Silverstone, they've got Simon Kappa, they've now got Mitchell and Bunce on top of Steve Nixon and Andy Howe. They've got a big collective again. So yeah, good to see that they finally got over the line. Mitchell's the one I'm really excited about.
But our first question from Harry asks, how would you see the relationship working between Eddie Howe, Paul Mitchell and James Bunce? And if it does kind of come, he says, in a way which maybe some power comes off from what Eddie Howe does day to day, does that make the England job a little bit more attractive if he's offered it?
Yeah, look, I've seen a couple of people in the last couple of days since Southgate stepped away say that, you know, is now the perfect time for Eddie Howe to go. Because Amanda Staveley's left, because Dan Ashworth's gone, because there's been so much change behind the scenes, and maybe Eddie Howe hasn't got the power that he once has. I maybe think it's the opposite. I actually think that this is maybe a clean slate. I say clean slate. There hasn't really been, mistakes made that they need to wipe off the slate. But I just think this is a fresh start, a restart for them. They're 2 or 3 years into the journey now. They've done very well to this point, with maybe a minor setback last season. I think Eddie Howe will be relishing working with someone of the pedigree of Mitchell. I think what we've seen from Darren Eales in the last couple of days, and I think we'll continue to see, is steadfast support in Eddie Howe.
Do you think it works the other way as well? Paul Mitchell will be looking forward to working with a manager like Eddie Howe?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. You look at where Mitchell's been the last couple of years. Southampton, Tottenham did very, very well in the Premier League. Then he went further afield and worked with the likes of Monaco. He worked with 3 Red Bull clubs. And Monaco were desperate to keep him, but he wanted to come back to the Premier League. And a lot of speculation around him in Manchester United, and you think Manchester United, if they wanted him, probably could have went out and got him, and Newcastle United have ended up essentially offloading Ashworth and getting Man United's main target. So I think Mitchell will be relishing not just working with Howe, but actually being back in the Premier League, and actually the club which the trajectory is only going one way. A lot of money to spend, a lot of ambition. I think it suits all parties.
And I guess when you're Paul Mitchell and you've got these offers on the table, the manager in charge of that club, whoever that is, will play a significant role in where you end up, because you don't want to go to a club where there's a manager already in charge and then he has to be sacked because things haven't gone right. He has to be sacked within a few months, because you don't want that upheaval. Yeah. In an ideal world, you want to go in, the manager who's done really well in the first couple of years, he's been there, he's loved by the fan base. That relationship with him, grows, and it becomes a part of the success of the football club. So I think he will look at the chance to work with Eddie Howe, and he'll be backing him 100% to get things right, because you don't want to have to force your manager out.
Oh, 100%. He's coming into a very stable environment, isn't it? I know it hasn't always felt like that the last couple of weeks, but actually you've still got very, very competent people behind the scenes. Bunce obviously coming in is a huge help as well. And I actually think, maybe we're a little bit biased on this podcast sometimes, but I actually think you look at Manchester United and there is a little bit of upheaval there. Yes, they're getting, very, very highly regarded staff members in behind the scenes, and they're making lots of changes, but it's a bit of an unknown. You feel like Newcastle are a lot more settled. They're heading in the same direction. Everyone's pulling together. And I think it speaks volumes that he's wanted to come back to the Premier League, and Newcastle is the one he's chosen. I can't understate how big of an appointment this is, given his standard in the game, given the success literally that he's had at every club he's been. You look at the transfer record of the clubs that he's left, and the managers that he's worked under. It's a really, really good appointment. And as I alluded to earlier, and as you've been saying all summer, I felt like last week when it was announced, okay, this is the bit of good news we've needed after so much uncertainty and doom and gloom, and Ashworth, dominating the headlines. I think it will give him a big boost, and I think Eddie Howe will be thinking, okay, now we can, get down to business.
It's his reputation, isn't it, more than anything? If Dougie Friedman had come in, got a good reputation within the English game, but I think it maybe would have been a bit of an underwhelming appointment, which isn't anything on him. I think it just would have been, but Paul Mitchell has got that reputation and that name, and that's really picked people up. But I'm really excited to see the work of James Bunce, and I feel like Eddie Howe will be as well, because he's a manager who always wants to learn. He understands that you're never at the top of the game for too long, because there's always something new that comes along where you've got to pick it up and you've got to improve. And I think more than anything, having someone like James Bunce there with his reputation, with what he's achieved and his know-how of fitness and how to not only drive players to the next level, but keep them fit and fresh. Eddie Howe will be rubbing his hands at that, because he'll be thinking, well, look what I achieved when I had a fully fit squad, top 4 football. And then Eddie Howe will be so excited that he's got someone right at the top of the game in that industry where the players, more than anything, can just be kept fit and fresh.
And this is Eddie Howe's whole mantra, isn't it? How can I improve the players that I've got? Yes, we've got all this money waiting to be spent behind the scenes, but he, as you say, he will relish having someone who is full, full mantra, full setup is getting the best out of players. So, as I said, 2 very positive appointments. PSR is out, in the rear view mirror. Darren Eales has came out and spoke very highly. If they can keep Eddie Howe from England's grasp, they're heading into the season in a really strong position.
Just in a sentence, because I
It's a
don't want
big
to
if.
dwell on it too much. But Eddie Howe, England manager, will it happen?
No, not yet.
No, I think it's too
don't
soon
think.
for him. So hopefully he turns down any advances. We have a question here from Andrew, who says, "Hi, Andrew and Aaron. I really enjoy the podcast. Long may it continue. The question that I have for you relates to bringing in players on loan. It's an avenue that the club have used quite sparingly over the last few years, and whenever we've been linked with a player recently, it always seems to be with a view to signing them on a permanent transfer. The PSR period has reset after June the 30th, but we still have to watch our spending this summer. Do you think we should therefore be exploring loan deals for lower priority positions, such as a third striker, to provide more cover? Many thanks, Andrew Jones." Thanks for that, Andrew. Really interesting question. I did a little bit of research about this, and last season across the Premier League, there were 38 players who were on loan, and collectively they made 593 appearances, which averages out at about 15 appearances per player. Although, of course, some players wouldn't have played that many games, while others players pretty much played a full season. But if you look at who these players were, very few jump out at you and go, "Oh, they'll improve the side." I think that's probably the key point to this answer to the question.
Yeah, just broadly not broadly, just to answer Andrew's question, I actually think, looking in the loan market is very shrewd. I wouldn't be against Newcastle going out and signing loan players. But I think the stats that you pulled up and that you'll go into in a bit more detail actually show the fact why Newcastle probably haven't. Under Dan Ashworth historically doesn't like signing loan players. He likes players to come in permanently so that he can work with them, mould them, eventually either, get them in the first team or sell them on. Eddie Howe, and it's a quote that I think has stuck with me for years, he once said that Newcastle had no friends in the market. Now, that was in relation to Newcastle trying to sign Chelsea players. I think they were linked with Pulisic and Broja and Gallagher at the time. Loan deals, Chelsea weren't going to do them any favours. Now, I think that will be the same again this summer. I don't think any big clubs, as we've seen in the last couple of windows, will want to do Newcastle any favours. I don't think you'll see them loaning players from Manchester United, from Arsenal, from Liverpool. And then I think if you go to the opposite end of the Premier League table and you look at some of the lesser clubs like Forest or Bournemouth, I don't think they'll want to be loaning their best players to Newcastle either, because if they're going to sell them, they'll want a big fee for them. Now, I think this leaves only one option, and that's what we saw last season. Do you then go out and loan someone like Lewis Hall, someone who's on the cusp of a first team somewhere else, very young, loads of potential? You can get him in on loan initially for a season, and then you can maybe push that permanent fee down the line, kick it down the road, and it goes on next year's balance sheet. But it also adds depth, which Andrew was alluding to. Do you then go out and just use the loan market to maybe strengthen in some positions that you haven't maybe got a lot of depth in?
I think in an ideal world, if the players were there to bring in on loan, then you would do it, because then you can move the funds elsewhere and spend, as Andrew has alluded to there, on more priority positions. But there's just not the quality out there. I mean, some of the players that were picked up on loan last season, you wouldn't get anywhere near Newcastle United's squad. And those who have a bit of talent about them, a lot of them just have the permanent transfer fees tied into their deal. So we look at Bournemouth's Lewis Sinistera, who joined from Leeds on loan but became a permanent signing in February at the cost of £20 million. So there's an example. These sort of clauses are in these deals, like Lewis Hall when he arrived from Chelsea. Now, there are other examples like Clement Lenglet, who spent the last 2 years on loan from Barcelona, Spurs and Aston Villa, who probably would offer something and very decent cover. But then you've got the wages. He's not going to be on a cheap wage at all. I just think it's about the quality out there. Yeah. And there's not many decent players who would come in and improve Newcastle United, but also offer that cover, because we know Eddie Howe didn't really have the rotation last season. You think that's something that he's really going to be looking at when it comes to this season, including the players he'll bring in this summer. I think it just comes down to the quality that's available on loan. It's just not there.
Yeah, I think just to flip it the other way, I think if Newcastle can somehow pull off another deal similar to Lewis Hall, then, it's an absolute no-brainer. Can you then go to a club who isn't maybe in any financial trouble? They don't mind waiting another season to get some, a permanent fee for him. But I agree. I think if Newcastle are going to do it, I can see either them going abroad, which they haven't tended to do so far in terms of loan signings, or they go out and sign depth, later in the window after they've got some more permanent moves in.
And I think you look at Spurs seem to have, at least on paper, a good record of managing to sort loan deals out. But again, they're quite expensive when you get into the detail, and they're not always players who are at the top of the game. You know, they need a bit of love and nourishment, and I just don't think that's what Newcastle United need. It's not what Andrew was asking about either. He was asking about building the squad for lesser priority positions. And other players to mention, I mean, you go out and get the young players. You know, Fati from Barcelona was on loan at Brighton last season, and there was loads of fanfare around that. But he's gone back after quite an underwhelming season. Then there's flops as well. Shall we mention your man?
Who's my man?
You know your man. The listeners and the viewers know your man.
I can't think who my man might be.
Flops like Calvin Phillips.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I mean, Phillips was a big gamble for West Ham, wasn't he? Because one of the wages is on, two, because, you know, he signed in January when West Ham needed a big boost. I think West Ham will be thanking their lucky stars there wasn't an obligation to buy in that deal. And obviously Newcastle, as you say, dodged a bullet.
But again, they've paid probably 12 million to loan him for 6 months.
Big gamble, isn't it?
And that's the kind of market out there,
yeah.
Which is just an absolute minefield to navigate. And you know, you do have options. I mean, like Brozier is a really interesting one.
Yeah.
You know, he was on Fulham and loan. You know, again, he's a man with huge potential. But how much is he going to cost Newcastle United to loan? Because I think if you look at, again, in an ideal world, if Newcastle United keep Alexander Isak, which they will do, and they keep Callum Wilson, which is up in the air, split opinion. We've got a question. The next question from Stephen Locke actually is about strikers. So this all rolls into one. But then it is about what do you do when it comes to that third striker? Because they need a third striker. You know, do you go out and spend 25, 30 million on someone who's unproven, like the name I mentioned last week, which I got a lot of stick for, so I'm not mentioning it again? Or do you go and try and loan someone like Brozier, who's going to be on a heavy wage, and Chelsea will probably want to include some sort of obligation to buy in that as well, and hasn't really set the world alight?
Well, I think that's bang on, isn't it? Gone are the days where you can get a loan deal for nothing. You know, loan deals now come with big 8, 10, 12 million pound fees attached to them, which is obviously going to eat in Newcastle's budget. Now, obviously, I was away last week, missed last week's podcast. Who did you get stick for naming as the third striker?
Liam Delap.
Oh, Liam Delap, your man from Hull.
Yeah,
stick for that.
I got
fans and listeners
a lot of stick for that.
Not happy with that one.
Has he actually joined Ipswich? Has he been announced?
I'm not sure. I can.
But I think we'll ask Stephen's question now, because this all rolls into the topic about a striker. And he says, will we sign a striker this summer? If so, who are our striker targets? So will Newcastle United sign a striker this summer? Do they have to sign a striker this summer? From my point of view, Aaron, they 100% have to. If Callum Wilson stays, they need to sign a striker. If Callum Wilson goes, they need to sign 2.
That's interesting. I think look, there's no denying that Newcastle's majority of the window hangs around what happens with Callum Wilson. Now, Eddie Howe has been steadfast in his belief. He has not changed his tune once. He wants Callum Wilson to stay. One, because he knows him very well. One, because he trusts him and respects him. But the main reason is he knows if Callum Wilson goes at this stage of his career, it is going to cost you a lot of money to replace him. Callum Wilson, who would probably get at a push 15 million for his services, who constantly hits double figures, he's going to cost 50 million to replace. Now, I think what Newcastle United will do, and I think what they want to do behind the scenes, I think if Howe can keep Wilson, and they can also sign, and you're not going to like this, I know you're not, I can already feel you're not going to like this, but I think we know they're putting a lot of effort and a lot of interest and manpower on finding a right midfielder, a right winger, someone who can instantly walk into that team. But I think Eddie Howe wants someone who can also play on the right, but through the middle. They've done it with Gordon on the left. They haven't had to do it too often, but he can do it if needs be. I think they will want someone on the right who can also play through the middle. Look at someone like Brian Mbeumo, who can play in both positions. Now, I think if they do that, then does that negate the need to sign a third striker? You'll say no, they still need someone. Is this where they go into the loan market and say we can go and get someone? Yes, obviously I'm not going to go and get Delap now, but do they go to City and say, You know, who is your next Rory Delap? Cole Palmer. We'll come and give them.
Next Rory Delap.
Sorry, Rory Delap. Liam Delap. Who's your next Cole Palmer? Who's your next youngster that you're going to loan out? We need some backup. We'll take them.
Look, I think that is what makes Brian Mbeumo maybe a slightly better option in terms of that versatility than Anthony Elanga, because he can play in different positions. But then I think if you do that, you sign someone to play right wing, you're going to say, look, if need be, you're going to have to go up top. Look what happened last season when Anthony Gordon had to go up top. It just didn't work. Yes, he can do that. He can play there, but he's so much better on the left. Brian Mbeumo so much better on the right. You punish yourself. You hurt yourself because you haven't got the options up top.
But just to again, well, one, play devil's advocate, and two, back my point up. Do Newcastle have enough in the tank, kitty-wise, to go out and sign a backup to Wilson if he goes, and a right winger?
Yes.
And a centre back?
I would put a striker and a right winger ahead of a centre back.
That's interesting. I think fans will be split on that, because I think, yes, they're looking stocked at the back, but I think actually if you dig deeper, there may be just one light.
Let us know in the comments on YouTube where your transfer priority lies. So just going back to Stephen's question here. So will Newcastle United sign a striker this summer?
Yes. I think they will.
Okay. So are you saying that on the basis they keep Wilson? Because the answer to the next question depends on whether Wilson stays or goes, doesn't it?
I think Eddie Howe wants a right winger who can play through the middle and who's a goal scorer. But I also think, knowing what happened to Wilson last season and knowing that Alexander's had these groin issues, I think they will want another striker in. Now, I'm not saying he's the man at all, so please don't jump at me in the comments. They've got Garan Kowal back, who was meant to be, this was meant to be the time he was coming into the team. Is he going to get a chance this summer? And maybe show what he can do. I know, but look, I'm not saying he is the third choice striker, but I'm sure they'll give him a go in summer. And I'm not saying he's at the standard. I think he will get loaned out again. Do they have anyone else coming through? Ben Parkinson? Probably not. I can't really think of any other young strikers that stand out. So yeah, I think they will. I think they'll sign a striker. I think the priority to me, and people will be bored of me saying it, but it's got to be a right winger. And then I'm torn between whether it's another striker and it's a centre back. It all depends on Wilson. If Wilson goes, then a striker becomes the priority, obviously. So we
know, as you say, Eddie Howe wants to keep Callum Wilson. We understand the reasons why. But for me, if someone comes in with a 15 million, 20 million pound bid,
20 million, really?
I think you've got to cash in.
I don't think you're going to get.
I don't think you are going to get that. But 15 million is enough for me to turn my head and say, do we cash in? Because I think we'll be sitting here by Christmas and he will have been injured and missed 6-7 games.
If hang on,
if that happens,
hang on, let me phrase
this. There's been a big error, because last season they were hurt by the fact that when Alexander Isak was ill, i.e. against Brighton, he's off colour. They had no one to replace him because they hadn't replaced Chris Wood, and they'd gambled on Callum Wilson, getting over the injuries which have plagued his career. And I say that with a really heavy heart, but I just don't think Newcastle United, with what they need to achieve this season, get top 4 football, I don't think they can gamble on Callum Wilson's fitness again. I just don't.
Right, I'm gonna. Sorry, I've had to write this down. I'm gonna put this to you. What would you prefer? It's September 1st. We're sat here doing the Monday show. The transfer window's closed. Newcastle United have ended the window with Alexander Isak, Callum Wilson, and a big money first choice right wing signing. Or they've ended the window with Alexander Isak, Miguel Almiron, and a backup striker who's replaced Wilson, but he's cost 40 or 50 million.
Oh, it's got to be the first option, without a doubt. But if I was painting the perfect scenario, you get 15 million for Callum Wilson, you bring in someone to rival Alexander Isak, and you go out and find
for 50 million,
right?
And then,
but you've got 15 million extra on funds. You're going to sell Miguel Almiron, and you're probably going to sell Kieran Trippier, I would think. So the funds are coming in.
What if you can't sell Miggy?
Well, this is my ideal scenario, though. It's happening. And then you go out and you find that person out on the wing, which for me would be Brian Mbeumo or Anthony Elanga. And I know people come at me in the comments and say that's not the top 4 quality signings that Newcastle United need to ensure Champions League football. But for me, those two, proven in the Premier League, would be absolutely superb for Newcastle United.
But I think just at the minute, look, we're sat here. If anyone's listening to this later, we're sat here on July 18th. The window's been open a month. All we've seen so far from Newcastle United is this really, really concrete effort to sign a right winger, and a big money one at that. They expressed their interest in Michael Olise, lost out to Bayern Munich. They have held an interest in Nico Williams, who doesn't look like he's going to leave Athletic Bilbao. They've expressed an interest, which has been stood up in Germany, for Serge Gnabry. All roads point to the fact that they are going to go and spend big money this summer on a right winger, which is the right thing to do. So I think that then leaves big question marks over whether they've got the financial capacity to go out and sign a backup striker, knowing how much it's going to cost in the window. Someone like Ivan Toney or Dominic Solanke would be a perfect backup to Alexander Isak, but in this day and age, it's going to cost you 50, 60 million. And I just think, do Newcastle have the funds to do it? I'm not sure they do.
Jonathan David has been linked, 24 years of age, plays for Lille, 71 goals in 146 games, absolutely superb striker. He will cost you a lot of money. Obviously, they went after Dominic Calvert-Lewin before the PSR, or as the PSR window came to a close. I think they will still hold an interest. They do still hold an interest there if they can get that for a knockdown price, which just isn't going to happen. I mean, the most you'd really want to pay for Dominic Calvert-Lewin is probably 25, 30 million at a push. I wouldn't want to pay any higher than that, because I think well, that's it. And you're risking you're essentially bringing someone in with nearly as bad as a record on the injury front as Callum Wilson,
who didn't score as many goals as him last season.
Yeah, it's a massive gamble.
With a clean bill of health. It's a huge gamble. Calvert-Lewin, I would be steering clear. I think the only reason you would try and do that is if you get a really, really knockdown deal. I would want to go less than 20. And Everton are in a little bit of a position at the minute where they need to sell before they can buy. There's a lot of interest in Onana. There's a lot of interest in DCL. There's a lot of interest in Branthwaite, who they're trying to keep. If you say to them, look, I mean, even 15, 20 million,
he certainly wouldn't be my
first choice. But he's one of few realistic options.
Do you know what I would present to you, right? Giving you a man of the scenarios, right? Because I know my first two options out on the right wing of Mbeumo and Elanga don't win the hearts of everyone watching and listening. I get that. So let's say they go out and they spend 70, 80 million pounds on a European winger out on the right who's proven at the highest level, big marquee signing, and then they still manage to bring in Brian Mbeumo, and he could be that backup third striker if they keep Callum Wilson. That's another scenario that I'd present you, because he can play, and I think he does a better job than Anthony Gordon in that position. And so maybe that's what they do. We know Eddie Howe likes that fluid nature where players can play across the front three. So maybe that's something to look down. And it's not going to be an out-and-out third striker.
Well, that's exactly the point I was making at the start of the segment. I think if they can find someone who can play out on the right, but also through the middle.
But how? I've just presented that scenario, but how you present that to Brian Mbeumo is another question.
Well, I think you present it to him as you are coming in as our first choice right winger.
Yeah.
Who is also just happens to be comfortable playing through the middle.
But if they go out and sign a big marquee right wing at the same time as well, that's what I'm saying.
Then it becomes harder.
Are you concerned that we're a month away from the kick-off and we're yet to see a signing or two?
No.
I'm obviously signed John Ruddy and Vakadimos, but and Lloyd Kelly as well, which would be a fantastic signing. But we haven't seen a big money signing. I've seen a few people raise concerns, but you're not too fussed.
No, look, I think it's natural. We're a month in the window. Fans always every summer want this big name marquee signing. It hasn't arrived, but Alexander Isak was very, very late in the window. Sandro Tonali was a little bit earlier last summer, but still, he sort of came out of nowhere. So it doesn't worry me.
Okay, so there we go. I think the whole striker scenario verdict conclusion depends on Callum Wilson.
Just to finally kill this one dead, Liam Delap, not Rory, has signed for
5 days ago. Yeah, just
5 days ago. So we can officially.
I think everyone's negative comments towards me beat the interest out of me. So I didn't end up following that one to then. But you know what, right? I'm going to put him in my fantasy football team for this season.
Good luck with that.
And he's going to score 20-odd goals, and I'm going to be sitting there, cigar. I mean, I don't smoke, but, you know.
Don't smoke or drink.
Alcohol-free champagne. Rocking away in the May sunset thinking, hey, guys, there's the guy we should have signed. I did tell you. I'm going to be proved wrong. Right. Stephen also asks, Why do we want so many goalkeepers when surely 3 senior keepers would suffice?
Well, the goalkeeping department at the minute, I think, yes, they've had a big revamp, but I actually think towards the end of the summer it might not look that different. And what I mean by that is Mark Gillespie's obviously still there, living the dream of being the 4th choice goalkeeper. John Ruddy is essentially replacing Loris Karius. Vlaka Dimos, I think, could end up replacing Martin Dubravka. And then if you don't sign anyone else, that's Nick Pope keeping his number 1 position. So yes, on the face of it, you've obviously swapped 2 in, 2 out. But I think it will probably be the case of Nick Pope is number 1. Vlaka Dimos is his backup. John Ruddy, aka Loris Karius, doesn't play unless it's, I mean, Karius did play in 2 quite big games, but on paper shouldn't play. Now, I think the only thing that changes that and would probably add more weight to this question is if Newcastle then go out and sign another goalkeeper. Do they go and revive their interest in James Trafford, which I don't think they should do. I think 4 is plenty at the minute, or 5. Sorry, I'm talking as if Dubravka's gone. I think they've got enough already. It's a shame about Mamashashvili because he had such a good Euros, and if Newcastle had swooped before that, they would have got a really good goalkeeper. I think he's now obviously not really on the list, and I think he cost a lot more than they wanted him. Trafford, we've just spent 15 minutes talking about that budget and signing a striker. I don't think they should go and spend 20 on a goalkeeper. Dubravka, I think, should go. I think it's pointing towards the fact he will go. And then I think you're left with four, and I think that's enough.
So with some exits, it'll look like just the right number.
I think if Dubravka goes, it's the right number. If Dubravka doesn't go, then it's looking maybe a little oversubscribed.
And Stephen, his final question is, have the club learnt their lessons regarding PSR and ensure that we're never in the position, i.e. the mad dash to sell players before the PSR deadline ever again?
Yeah, I think they definitely have. I think they will definitely not want to go through a repeat of that manic weekend we saw at the last weekend of June. Darren Eales spoke very
openly about it.
About it the other week, and I think there was a line in it where he basically said they need to become better traders. And I think what he means by that is they need to make sure that they're getting more money for the players they're selling. He made a big deal about how they don't want Elliot Anderson or Andy Carroll or 35 million to be their record sale. But I think what he also means about that is they need to be, they need to be better prepared in terms of trading. They won't want to leave it late. They know now the deadline of PSR when it rolls every year. They know what that entails now. And I wouldn't be surprised if Eddie Howe was so determined last January to not sell any players. Didn't want to lose Callum Wilson or Kieran Trippier or Miguel Almiron. You could understand that because of the injuries. But I think it would have saved so much of a headache at the end of last month if they had got rid of one player in January. And I think they'll know that going forward.
I guess it sounds a little bit daft saying this when you're a multi-million-pound business. But sometimes you've got to get your fingers burned to get the lesson from it, really. And that's what's happened there.
They haven't had to learn many lessons since taking over the club. Unai Emery was a big one before they got Eddie Howe in. And I think this is another one that they will look back on in a couple of years as a real positive, because I don't think they'll ever get in that position again. And if they do, then, it's a real head scratcher.
We've got Eric all the way from the United States who says, hello, long-time US-based Newcastle United supporter here, love the pod. One question I've always had is this: why was Alexander Isak? No. Why was Isaac Hayden never given a chance under Eddie Howe? Howe worked miracles with other so-called duds from that team like Joe Linton and Kraft. Hayden was always a professional, solid performing player under the previous ownership and only 26 years old at the time of the takeover. I've always wondered what if with him. I'm curious as to why he was frozen out from the get-go under Eddie Howe. Many thanks, Eric.
I mean, look, remember in January when we were talking about potentially bringing him back as a
defensive
bit of
midfielder?
backup,
It was either him or Calvin Phillips,
right?
right?
I mean, to be fair, it probably would have been better off with Hayden. It's an interesting one with Hayden. Hayden from the get-go, and he got very unlucky that when Howe came in, he'd suffered a knee injury. He was obviously famously left out of the 25-man squad. Big blow for him. And that summer, he was essentially told by Eddie Howe, look, I want a clean start and I want to go. And Isaac Hayden was very, very understanding of that. He spoke about how, players like him and John Joe Shelby spoke among themselves and said, look, we're so privileged to play for this football club. but we know the direction of travel it's going in, and we know that we're not going to be here in a couple of years' time. So I think from that stage, Isaac Hayden had in his head there was no way back. Now, I think he obviously thought there was going to be a permanent move, but I also think Eddie Howe had got to the stage where he'd never envisaged him in his team and didn't want to bring him back in from the cold. You've also got to remember he's had a lot of injury problems. It hasn't worked out for him at the likes of Norwich or QPR. It didn't work
17 matches he played last season.
Yeah.
He played quite a few for Standard Liège as well.
I think 9 or 10, and then
11,
he left
so
under a cloud. I don't think they were paying the wages. So it hasn't worked out at a lower level at these loan clubs. I know some people were, saying, should we get him back in January? I just think maybe Newcastle have passed him by now. I think maybe it's not as level anymore. I don't think you can question his attitude or his professionalism. I don't think it's anything to do with that. I think Eddie Howe has a great respect for him, and Eddie Howe, was very gracious when he called him and said, "Look, we're going to move you on." I think the problem Newcastle have had is that they just haven't been able to offload him permanently because of the wages and the fact that he's obviously still got
in the third year of 2026.
Yeah, 26, so 2 years left on the deal. Which is mental when you think about it. I mean, how long has he been out there? He's been out of the team since 2021.
So September 11th, 2020, he must have signed a 6-year deal.
And then a year later, he was frozen out by Howe. I mean, that is just the nightmares of Mike Ashley, isn't it?
Great attitude, great professional. I think you've spoken to him a couple of times. Really nice man.
Yeah, lovely man.
Just the levels passed him by, hasn't it? And hopefully he gets a club who can give him first team football, probably in the Championship, maybe lower league of the Premier League, and just overcomes those injuries.
He got so unlucky because of the timing of that knee injury where he couldn't really overcome it. He suffered another one at Norwich. And it's just one of those moments where you wonder if he was in that initial 25-man squad when Howe came in, could he have done a Jacob Murphy and could he have done a Miguel Almiron and just became so much better under Howe?
From Eric, isn't it? And that, do you know what? That's what gives me confidence that Black Demos, when he becomes Newcastle's number 2, because I agree with you, I think he will do. I look at the likes of John Litton and Kraft and think the magic touch of Eddie Howe.
Yeah.
And we're talking about a Champions League goalkeeper who won the Portuguese league with Benfica. So, not the worst pedigree. Ben Sendell asks, do you both think it's realistic that we sign a top centre-back, a right winger, and one other, given the revenue already received and the probability that Almiron goes at least as well? For what it's worth, TM from AC Milan, and he likes Jonathan David as well, would be a huge step forward for me, all linked and very attainable.
In terms of being realistic, I think yes. I think as we touched on earlier in the episode, I think right wing they've been making moves behind the scenes trying to get their targets for that position. I think there's still scope for a big money centre back, and when I say big money centre back, I mean 25-30 million.
Someone who comes in and replaces Fabian Schär.
Well, look, I think you can probably sell it to a player of, look, you are going to be battling with Fabian Schär for the right hand side of that defensive the centre back, but you are the future. You're going to be battling with him short term. He hasn't put a foot wrong for us. He very, very rarely misses matches through injury, despite the fact he's down injured every game. But I think they need someone of a similar age profile to Botman, who they've got their future, they've got the centre back partnership there, and they can start to mould it. Going forward, I think there's definitely scope for another right side centre back. They need a right winger and one other striker. It goes back to the striker. I think. Look, if we're sat here September 1st and they've signed a centre back who's going to rival Schär, an out and out right winger who can also play up front, and they've maybe got a third choice striker, and they've added a lot of depth with Kelly, and they've changed their goalkeeping department. Good window for me.
The chap from AC Milan, would it be your first choice?
Yeah, Theo's good. I still really like Joachim Andersen from Palace. I know he's not the youngest, and that goes against the argument of having someone of Botman's age, but I think
alongside Lloyd Kelly gives you the pace. He gives you
fantastic on the ball, very good positionally. I like him. Tamori, but Tamori's left-sided.
The issue I think you have is, though, if it was Andersen over the chap from AC Milan, I think some fans would look at that and think, oh, it's not the big headline signing. Where I look at it and think, proven Premier League player who's a very good centre back.
Yeah, exactly.
But maybe that's just me. Let us know what which centre back you would like to see signed, if indeed a right-sided centre back is your priority. Thanks, Ben, for that question. And DC Geordie asks, if we are planning a major signing, given the success at goal scoring we had last season and our poor defensive record, shouldn't we be going big on that right-sided centre back and a goalkeeper? He adds. Goalkeeper, it's done, it's dusted.
Yeah, it's done, it's dusted.
I mean, in the ideal world, it would have been the Valencia goalkeeper, but it hasn't happened.
Yeah.
They've obviously looked at it and thought priority lies elsewhere.
Yeah.
Right-sided centre-back. Let me reword the question. 60 to 80 million pounds on a right winger, or 80 million pounds on a right-sided centre-back?
Right winger.
Okay.
But they need a more. I mean, I'm sorry, any listeners or viewers that are bored of me saying it, but I just really want a big money right winger, because I think it will just transform the team and take them to another level, like Tonali did, like Alexander Isak. They need that one big sign in the summer, like
Tonali did, and he's
no, but you know what I mean. He elevates the level of that squad, and I think a right winger would do that. Now, that's not to say I'm against them going out and signing a big money centre back, because they haven't done it, and to be fair, Newcastle have done very well not doing it, because all the other big clubs have done it, and sometimes they've been stung, sometimes they haven't. Van Dijk, 75 million. Obviously, they haven't been stung. Harry Maguire, 80 million. Chelsea, you can list them. Fofana, 80 million. A lot of these centre-backs nowadays, young, up and coming, are going to cost you big money. Manchester United, by the way, Lenny Yoro from Lille, is it? £62 million, and he's 18 years old, and he's got 1 year left on his deal.
So Dan Ashworth is
that is a risky deal. So Newcastle, I think, have done very well to not do that. I mean, Sven Botman's price tag, I know he's out injured, but it gets better and better by the day. The fact they only got him for 35 million. So I'm not against them signing a big money centre back at all, and I think that's the way the market is going these days. But if it's the choice between the two of them this summer, you know what my answer is.
I think we all do. Ian Hartley says, how likely is it we go for a defensive midfielder? I still think this will turn out to be one of the biggest problems, as Bruno is not defensively good enough against bigger clubs, and we better playing as an 8 in those games. Well, I didn't write that, by the way. I was
going to say, we've gone 40 minutes or 45 minutes so into the podcast, and we haven't brought up a number 6, which is probably a new record. We always bring up a 6 when we're talking about
I think it's needed. I don't think it'll happen because Eddie Howe likes that fluidity, but I agree with Ian. I think it's going to be a massive problem. Unless Tonali is the answer, but I don't think he
is. This is the thing. I think we didn't see enough of Joelinton, Bruno, and Tonali last season to know whether it's going to work. Because on paper, that is the 3, isn't it? Who drops out of that if you bring in a 6?
Well, that's the question.
That's the big question. You don't want to drop any of them. So.
But there was too much space between the midfield and the defence consistently last season. So it has to work, and it has to work from the get-go.
To answer Ian's question, I don't think it's likely because, as we've just discussed at length, is because they've got so many priorities elsewhere. It's up for debate as to whether it's needed. But I don't think it'll happen. But very interesting. We spent weeks, didn't we, talking about what would happen if someone like Miley or Anderson left. Do they need to replace him? Anderson's gone. Doesn't look like at the minute they're on the hunt, at least actively for another midfielder. So.
I think it's needed. I don't think it'll happen. I don't even think it'll be on the list of potential targets. Final question then comes in from Peter. Regarding St James's Park, seems to me they're almost dragging out this feasibility study as they 100% want to build a new world-class stadium. I do generally think they like St James's Park, but I think they've wanted to move ground from the day dot. I don't agree with that. I think they want to see it stay at St James's Park. I think Darren Eales has been quite clear, though. It's very complicated. Just building on the East Stand is going to be a headache for whoever it is because of the buildings behind it. The mill, the Gallagher is going to be difficult to expand, even though you've got the land behind it. It's already a big stand to build upwards. I know there's very, very experienced people working on this. Look, we all want answers, but I'm not at this moment frustrated with the lack of clarity or answers, because I understand it's going to take a long time. And even when we get it, this is just the beginning. We're talking years down the line.
Yeah, it's going to be such a long process. I'm not going to lose any sleep over a feasibility study taking a week or two or a month or two longer than anticipated. Darren Eales and insiders at the club say that it's very close to being unveiled. I agree with you. I think they want to stay at St James's Park. I think they know that's where the heart and soul of the club is. They know that the vast majority of fans know, or that's where they want to stay. Seen a few people on social media the last couple of days saying, that's why Staveley's gone. They wanted her out because she wanted to stay at St James's. They want to move to a big stadium. I don't buy it. I think they'll stay.
I do as well. That has been a transfer special Q&A with that St James's Park question chucked in at the end. We hope you guys have enjoyed this. If you are on YouTube, do give the video a thumbs up and leave us a rating and review on the podcast channel. Head over to chroniclelive.co.uk for all the latest Newcastle United news, including our daily transfer live blog with all the rumours, gossip and concrete stories. Myself and Aaron will be back for Monday's show on Monday, if you didn't guess. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys next week.